We're at the foot of the Rockies in Colorado Springs to have a look at how Jeppesen presents airport information on its taxiway diagram. We'll go through the highlights of the Jeppesen plate, how ForeFlight makes it easy to integrate it, and its major differences from the FAA taxiway diagrams. This is Dan from FlightInsight, partnering with ForeFlight on a series of videos highlighting the Jeppesen chart products and how they integrate with ForeFlight Mobile to make your instrument flights safer and smoother. From inside the cockpit of our Cessna 152, we pull up ForeFlight, which shows us on the ground at Colorado Springs, a Charlie airport. The easiest way to bring up the taxiway diagram is to tap Taxiways. If you have the Jeppesen subscription on ForeFlight, you'll be given this plate by default. Again, it shows us on the west side of the airport on the GA ramp. We could tap NOTAMs to pull up any associated NOTAMs. Let's dive into the taxiway diagram. Biggest improvement here from the FAA plates is the way communication information is presented. Like on other Jeppesen plates, the frequencies can be read left to right, and more importantly, they're displayed in order of how you'd use them on a typical departure. The FAA plate presents the frequencies as a list, and they're not in any kind of operational order. Let's say we're going to make a VFR departure. We'll start by grabbing the ATIS, which will tell us the active runway, among other info. Let's say for the purpose of this demo that we're going to be using runway 17 left on the other side of the field. Next, because this is a Charlie airport, we'll need to contact Springs Clearance. They'll assign a squawk, a departure frequency, and any other departure instructions. Next, we'd contact Ground for taxiway instructions. After taxiing to our assigned runway, we'd contact Tower, who would issue a takeoff clearance. And after we take off, we'd contact Departure, although the frequency issued in our clearance would be what we'd use if it were any different than what's listed here. Here are some other items the Jeppesen plate improves upon from the FAA diagram. Approach lighting systems are depicted for runways that have them. Sure, the approach plates for both FAA and Jeppesen have these, but what if you're doing a VFR arrival at night, not using approach plates, and wanted a quick way to see what kind of lighting to expect? Taxiways are identified by letters, which are all oriented right side up and offset from the depicted path, making them easier to read. FAA plates have the letters on top of and running parallel to the taxiway, so you get into weird scenarios where, like on taxiway Mike here, they have to underline the M to show you which way is up. Not very intuitive when you're in the cockpit. Some other additions on the jet plate which are nice to have include where the windsocks are at each runway, and a circle with a cross through it showing the airport reference point. This is where the Jeppesen database, used on GPS units, reckons the airport waypoint is. At fields like this with a huge footprint, it's helpful to know where exactly flying direct to the airport will take you on the field. Also, many instrument approaches use a minimum safe altitude with a radius around an airport reference point like this. This airport has 4 hotspots on it, which are areas that have been identified as having a risk of collision or runway incursion where heightened attention is needed. To get some additional information about these hotspots, we can look to another Jeppesen plate. We'll tap Procedure, and in the Airport tab, we see 3 Jeppesen items. The taxiway diagram we were just looking at is the second item. The first item, Airport Info and Takeoff Mins, will include details on the hotspots. That third item is takeoff obstacle notes needed for awareness on obstacle departure procedures. Let's look at item 1 though. This plate is sometimes called 10-9A after the code at the top. It's an addendum to 10-9, which is the taxiway diagram we saw earlier. It's here that we can reference details about each of this airport's 4 hotspots. On the right side of the page, we have other departure information. The takeoff minimums for each runway and their obstacle departure procedures is listed, including standard minimums. The obstacle departure procedure itself is shown, as here it's in textual format. A diverse vector area is used here, meaning controllers can assign random vectors on departures below a minimum IFR altitude as long as we can comply with the climb gradients listed here. Finally, the requirements to use this airport as an alternate in our IFR flight plan are given. At some smaller airports like College Park here, there's more room available, so information like this is actually just included on the taxiway diagram itself. Of course, integrating the Jeppesen taxiway diagram with ForeFlight allows us to use Geo-referencing as we taxi, and to use the Draw tool to plot out our taxi instructions to runway 17 left. Taxi via Alpha 3, cross 35 left, Charlie 3, Golf, Echo, Echo 1. As we taxi down, our position gives us great situational awareness of turns and runways, and allows us to identify which taxiway we're on or approaching, all the way to the end. So, having covered the taxiways, we'll focus on instrument departures in our next video on Jeppesen products.